Getting a peek at the dart frog enclosure as we get ready to start. Just going to take a look here at the first comments and see who's here. I can see Frank the Tank is here, and Ashley N, Tofu Enjoyer, and Wally's stream is at the same time. No wonder, that does make it a little bit tricky. Darn. Cullen, hello. Eric, hello. We've got lots of people here already, which is great. Great to see you here. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm going to open the Patreon comments so that I can make sure that I address those during today's stream. I'm going to give it a few minutes, let a few more people pop in, but I do want to make sure I give everybody a chance to do that. Let's see. I got several comments, it looks like. Just checking through into the different spots and making sure. Yep, I did. Got some comments. Looks like we've got comments from Roger, Logue, and Sandy Sizemore, and Eric. Nice. Let's see who else is here. We've got Zero Cool Ninja, Moon Over Miami, Donnie, Mizanar, and Dallin Watson. Well, hi there. And Sad Florence. I almost said, well, hello there, when I saw that. Ahoy, hoy, Sad Florence. Got 12 people in the stream. I'm actually going to be feeding the frogs in a second. That should bring them out. So let's do that, shall we? People are popping in and out. That's kind of fun. I'm going to give the frogs a little feeding right in front of the camera here. These are Drosophila Heidi, or Heidi, depending on how you pronounce it. With confidence is the best way to pronounce it. And these are dusted with Repashi's vitamin A supplement for dart frogs. The actual name escapes me, but the flies shall not escape the frogs. As you see, one of them has already emerged from its coconut cave. So there we go. Let's see. And thank you, Cullen. Glad you liked the enclosure. I did kind of a little bit of remodeling on it recently. To be honest, it was very overgrown, and I needed to give it an overhaul, so I did. You can see on the left of the enclosure, I've got some Ficus pumila and the quercifolia, or the oak-leafed fig. Near the coconut hut on the right, I've got some Selaginella, or peacock moss. There's some live sphagnum moss in here. Magnolia leaves make up a large proportion of the leaf litter. And then I've got several neoregalias growing in here. There are a couple of different kinds of ferns up near the top that you can't really see from here, but that's okay, because we're focusing on the dart frogs at the moment. But I do love my neoregalia bromeliads. I see that, let's see, got some questions. I see young lads here. Thank you, Moon Over Miami, for the reminder to hit the like button. Russell Anderson, D. Heidii are the bigger species. Yes, they are. The strain that is kept in captive culture is larger than Drosophila melanogaster, and also has large wings that are not functional in the flightless variety, but they are visible, and the flies can actually move them. They just can't fly with them. I'm watching flies right now, actually, kind of trying to dust themselves off in the, because I have more than the ones I just dumped in there. I'm going to dump in some more a little later. And yeah, they have the bigger wings. And the Drosophila melanogaster has a couple of different types. One that has wings that are mostly non-functional, but they can buzz around and kind of hop a little bit, about an inch or so at a time. And we've also got the Apteris, the basically wingless variety, where there's almost nothing left of the wings. So, and young lad, you've watched all the videos, you've caught up. So right now you're keeping updated. That's awesome. Young lad was telling me that all the videos had almost been watched, but now they all have. So that's very cool. So the cleanup crew in here, I have springtails. I think the last springtails I put in here were Sinella curviceta. I've also put Fulsomia candida in there. I'm not sure which ones are dominant. I'm looking down at the bottom. I think I see a Sinella curviceta crawling alongside the, in the glass under the substrate a little bit. I've got dwarf whites in here for isopods. I think that's I've gone through iterations of various things. I think dwarf whites are the ones now that are in there. And there are 3 frogs in the tank. The one you can see to the right now, that just turned around, is my male. And then I've got 2 females. And they have produced tadpoles for me, for anyone who's curious about that. They're a proven trio. They produced a number of tadpoles. I have every tadpole that I've taken out of the enclosure here has successfully morphed out into a froglet and been rehomed. So all to local people who, I think everybody who has received the frogs has, they all have been local, I know that, but I'm thinking all of them are also, aware of the channel. Some of them watch the channel, so I think that's pretty cool. The size of this enclosure here, let me pull back a little bit because it's a great question. Size of this enclosure, you can almost see the whole thing now. There's the whole enclosure essentially. This is a 29-gallon aquarium. And if you want to see the build playlist, I did a build playlist. If you look up Aquarimax Dart Frog, I think it is the name of the playlist, you can see the whole process. I documented everything from putting the substrate in to doing the background and just everything. And you can see I also documented the production or the build of this screen area in the back, the ventilated area, by a professional screen maker with like a chiffon style fabric to keep it from to keep flies in. I actually need to push this down because when I open the lid it moves a little bit, and now it is locked down and good to go. Keeps the flies in pretty well. So young lad, your Armadillidium vulgare are not doing so well again, just like before. I'm doing everything correctly. So remind me, are yours wild caught? And let's see, so Tofu Enjoyer, I think I did answer the question, didn't I? Because Cullen asked the same question, I guess I answered that question for both of you. So, cool, the cleanup crew question. I don't know if you can hear the clicking of the kitten playing around here. She's kind of loud. If it gets too loud, let me know if I need to make a change. Oh yeah, we got one climbing up the wall there. They're really pretty good at it. And when I built the enclosure, I put it together with the idea that the dart frogs would be able to climb all over and up things. I wanted to make sort of stairways, up in the sides of the enclosure, and they can get everywhere. They spend time right up at the top of the back of the background, and they spend time, up in the bromeliads and everything. Right now, not so much because they are eating, they're hunting, but they do indeed climb all over the enclosure. I'm going to put a few more flies in. Thought I'd just, kind of spread it out a little bit through the beginning of the live stream because it makes it more interesting when they're hunting. It's more fun to watch. There we go. There's the little guy hunting behind that leaf. Hard to see him. Let's see if I can zoom in. Please tell me if that impacts the quality negatively when I zoom in. If it does, I will avoid doing it. And Wavering Darkness, it might be too late. Maybe you already want dart frogs. I don't know. This is one of the best species to start with, from what I understand. I mean, it is the species, I started with 2 species at the same time, to be honest, but it is one of the best ones to start with. Oh, and young lad, good. I'm glad that is helping. Do you think that your wild-caught isopods are suffering from any of the cons that I mentioned in the video? Good question. So do the froglets ship well, Cassie? That is a great question. I would presume so. I've never shipped them. I've just housed them locally. You would have to be really careful about temperature because dart frogs are pretty temperature sensitive, both directions. Can't get too cold, can't get too hot. This is a species that does a little bit better, a little bit warmer than some of the others. It's a little bit more tolerant, which is another reason why it's a good beginner species. But I have never shipped one. And I did not get these shipped to me either. These are from Frank's Frogs, who happens to be local to me, and he brought these over to me when they were much younger and smaller. So, Yeah, I can't directly comment on that, but I do know the dart frog business people ship them all the time, so I imagine they must ship pretty well. And hello to you as well. So Waver in Darkness. Try not to want them because they aren't good for handling and I'd have to deal with fruit flies. Well, you're right about that. On both counts, you're 100% right. They are terrible candidates for handling, not good for the frogs at all. And dealing with fruit flies, yes, it's hard to avoid. I mean, I've heard of some people back in the old days who used rice flower beetles as their main staple food, but I don't think anybody really does that these days. And yeah, fruit flies are pretty much it. I don't really personally bother. I mean, I don't worry about dealing with fruit flies. I find it pretty simple, but I've been doing it for years, and I know it can be annoying. I mean, my wife certainly gets annoyed by them, so especially when they get out, which can be an issue sometimes. So young lad, temperature fluctuations can kill isopods on occasion, and especially wild-caught ones do seem more sensitive to warmer temperatures. So that could be it. If it got really hot in your house, it could have done it. That is possible. I'm not saying that is what happened, but it could be. So, okay, so the wild-caught ones are dead. Okay, well, are you getting anything where you're getting temperature differential on one side of the enclosure, like you have up against an exterior wall, so you're getting temperature differentials between one side of the enclosure and the other, and you're getting condensation as a result? Because that sometimes can do it. Sean Meister, greetings. Welcome. Got a good number of folks here in the stream now, 23. We've got 17 likes. If you haven't thrown a like up there, please smash that like button and we'll get some more people in this live stream. That would be great. In just a second, I'm actually going to start with some of the Patreon questions. And I do see the likes coming in, so thank you. Epic Galaxy 10 or X, where's a good place to look to purchase dart frogs? Well, if you don't have a local pet store that handles them, which a lot of them don't, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend getting them at a big box store, then it would be good to look at a place like Josh's Frogs. They have a pretty good reputation for dart frogs, and they have a pretty good selection. That's a good place. I have purchased things from them, not dart frogs, but dart frog supplies, and I've always had a good experience with them. And Waver in Darkness. The substrate is a little old. It looks darker than it actually is. I mean, right now it looks like black, right? And I'm looking at it, when I look on the camera, I can see that it's really dark substrate. It doesn't look that much in real life. When I look at it, it's not as bad as it looks there, but I would say it is, it's several years old, I guess. I will have to go back and look exactly and see how old. I don't think it's quite due for a change yet. It's doing okay, but yeah, that it totally does look almost like solid black on the camera, so I can understand why you would ask. Theropod Hunter, hello, and Stefan Spuden Scoville's hair up. Evening. Theropod Hunter getting an isopod mystery box. That sounds fun. Oh, you were asking about the substrate old. Okay, for that. So, okay, got it. So, straight 5420, do you have any Oniscus Ocellus orange? I do. I do have those. I have the BC Maple strain. But you've caught some in the wild. That's cool. And you're right, though. I will do trades on many occasions. So, wouldn't hurt to contact me. It would be nice to get a different bloodline going with the oranges, perhaps. If you can get them breeding, I'd be willing to probably do some kind of trade. And Waver in Darkness. Older substrate is good for bioactive, right? To an extent. It does have a lifetime, a lifespan, and you don't want to exceed that too much. It's usually, depending on the quality of the substrate and how it's maintained and kind of cleanup crew and all those kinds of things, it's usually, 5 years or so, can be a little longer. It depends on how often you stir it up and different things. But yeah, really super fresh substrate is not awesome because it will require a break-in period during which it will often have, fungal outbreaks and stuff like that. So it will not have a really robust, healthy microbial population right at first. So a really new substrate is not as good as an older one, a mature one. But once it gets mature, it does have a lifespan of a number of years. Rule of thumb, maybe approximately 5 years. Also, if it gets really wet, it can really shorten the life of the substrate if it gets waterlogged and stays that way for any length of time. So there's things that can impact that. Okay, well, young lad, it sounds like you're doing all the right things. And if you replace all of the substrate at once, that can actually be a problem. It can be hard on the isopods to replace all the substrate at once. But if you're replacing, 2/3 or 3/4 of it at once, that's usually good. And Kiefer Yeo, an Australian here, appreciating the beautiful dart frogs. Thank you for the Q&A. Well, you're welcome. I'm glad you're here. These are pretty striking dart frogs, I must say. If I were to pick dart frogs strictly by color, I'd probably pick some cobalt blue tinctorius, something like that. But this is a close one for me. These are beautiful. I love the yellow and black. So I think it's about time to hit some Patreon questions. Let's see. Will you shout hi to Julie Newcomb? It'll be the last time I fanboy you, I promised. Okay. Well, Julie Newcomb, hello. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, but hello, hello, hello. On behalf of Donnie. So, straight 50. I guess now I have to ask, the oranges I've collected, there was typically 1 or 2 per color and I'd go through. What would this color morph be about? Well, it is probably a... I hope I'm answering the right question here, but I hope I understand the question. This color morph is probably just a single gene recessive in which the pigment that produces gray has a precursor pigment that's orange, and so in normal isopod development, that pigment that is gray never gets formed because the precursor pigment, whatever changes the precursor pigment that is orange to become gray never does. And so it's a simple one mutation that causes that to happen, and it seems to be single gene recessive in most species we know about. And so what probably you have encountered you're probably in an area where in that locality that gene is not uncommon. And so you're getting individuals that have 2 copies of the gene, and it's going to be more rare, partly because it's probably not advantageous for survival, and it's also probably, because it's recessive, you're just getting more of the wild types, because even the heterozygotes are just going to look like wild types. Hopefully that answers your question. And let's see. Well, it may be bad luck, young lad, but I hope we're able to resolve it at some point. So the gecko, bumblebee dart frogs aren't that hard to take care of if you do a few simple things. One is spend enough money on the setup. Don't skimp on the setup. Setting up a dart frog enclosure is not cheap, particularly. You're going to spend more on the enclosure than you will on a trio of frogs in many cases, unless you're getting really fancy frogs. So you do need to spend the money to get a good quality substrate and setup. You don't necessarily need to make it super fancy, but you're going to need some kind of drainage layer, which here is the Featherlight lightweight drainage layer. It's a sintered glass recycled product. And then you get a screen separator. It's just like a nylon screen under that. It's kind of hard to see in the video. And then you've got your ABG mix or similar style substrate that's very aerobic, allows water and air to pass through it. And then you're going to put things like sphagnum moss and leaf litter. You're going to put decor like coconut huts and branches and pods of various sort. That's one that Froggy sent to me. There's several of those in there. There's another one, I don't know if you can see it in the video. And then you've got to get your vivarium style plants. If you want to put a background in, the frogs appreciate it because they can crawl on it. It makes for more surface area for them to use, but it's not a necessity. And then you do need to know how to culture fruit flies. That's pretty much a necessity. You need some good light. This is a Tinkman herb light from the BioDude. which I love. I think it's a great light. And you'll need to have, ventilation is going to be minimal, but you do need some. I had this, custom made this little screen section here with chiffon, and then just an aquarium lid. So you're going to need how to do all that. You're going to need to know how to do all that, or be able to do all that. There's plenty of tutorial videos out there, including mine, my step-by-step on how I did that. But they're not super hard to take care of once you've got that down. I would recommend culturing fruit flies for at least a couple months before you get your dart frogs, so that you know what you're doing. Unless you're prepared to just go to the pet store and get new fruit fly cultures as the old ones peter out. And if you're comfortable doing that, you could do that indefinitely too, as long as you have a good supplier. But you will need to be at least dealing with fruit flies the entire time. So hopefully that helps. Now we're going to look at some Patreon questions. Here is one from Eric. And Eric says, he says, what amphibians would you suggest having as a way to get the skills necessary to have dart frogs? And Eric, honestly, I think dart frogs are different enough from a lot of amphibians that, in a sense, if you've never kept amphibians before, dart frogs, it would make sense to keep almost any terrestrial amphibian, and that would give you some of the skills that you needed. It would help you get closer, help you gain some experience that would be useful for you with dart frogs. But honestly, dart frog care is different enough from many other frogs that if there's anything that could prepare you exactly for dart frogs, you might as well get dart frogs. You see what I mean? There's nothing that's a lot easier than dart frogs that still requires similar care. It is either very comparable in difficulty level to dart frogs, so there's really no point in getting one to teach you how to do it, or it's different enough that, again, there's not really any point in doing it. I hope that makes sense, and that's my opinion, but I really hope that makes sense. I would say that for me, I got mourning geckos before I got dart frogs, and they helped a lot. They actually have very, very similar requirements. Dart frogs do better with a little less ventilation in a little more moist situation, more humidity and so on. But other than that, they're very, very similar to dart frogs in care. And the fact that mourning geckos will also eat crested gecko diet in addition to the fruit flies and whatnot. But I had already raised fruit flies for a couple of years at least, feeding them to my, I'd also raised them to feed the fish and so on, but I had some extensive experience raising fruit flies before I got my dart frogs. Honestly, the best way to prepare yourself for keeping dart frogs, in my opinion, is to be comfortable culturing springtails, isopods, and fruit flies. And if you can do that, you're probably good. So hopefully that helps. Now we're going to move back to the chat, and then we'll go back to Patreon. Let's see. So Dallin Watson, I don't know much for they're poisonous. Are they display animals only, or can you handle them even minimally? Good questions. Dart frogs in the wild generally sequester toxins, or they collect toxins from their prey, and they store these toxins and are able to use them to defend themselves. Dart frogs in captivity don't have any of that because the kinds of things they are eating don't have toxins. We're giving them things like fruit flies and springtails and isopods and flower beetle larvae that don't have the toxins that they would need, so they don't have toxins. Even a wild dart frog that has toxins will lose those toxins after a little while in captivity. So they are no longer poisonous. These never were because they were captive bred, but even if they hadn't been, they would no longer be poisonous, having been in captivity for a number of years. But, like I said, these are captive bred, produced by Frank's frogs. Handling them is not recommended. I have only handled these frogs a couple of times, and that is when I'm changing out something, like removing plants or something. I've had the frogs once or twice somehow managed to evade, my vigilance and hop out of the vivarium as I'm doing that, and then I scoop them up and toss them back in the vivarium, but my hands had been cleansed of soap and that kind of thing beforehand, so it never caused them any harm. But the reason why you shouldn't touch them is basically not for your own safety, but for theirs, because they do have very permeable skins, and they will very readily take in whatever is on your hands, whether that's oil, soaps, lotions, any kind of toxin that you might have in your hands. Possibly Chytridium, the fungus that I mean, it's unlikely you'd have it on your hands unless you were dealing with other amphibians that had it, but if that's possible too. So could be a vector of disease. Most likely it's just going to be a toxin that is not a toxin to you, but it's salt from sweat on your hands or soap or something like that, soap residue. That kind of thing is what can hurt them. So it's not going to necessarily kill them if you have very clean hands, but it's not good for them, and it's just kind of risky. They're also kind of skittish that way. They don't really get used to handling like some frogs do, like White's tree frogs, for example. So Waver in Darkness, had my own morning geckos and giving their eggs to my dairy cow. Sounds mean, but I don't want a big colony of them. Well, that would be an effective way to get rid of them. I know what you're saying, in the feeling you might feel bad doing it, but dairy cows would take care of it really fast, for sure. When I have a pinky mouse that my snakes don't want, sometimes I'll find there's another snake that wants it. Sometimes I'll throw it in with the dairy cows or the Porcelia ornatus yellow dot, and boom, it's gone. Super fast. Crazy. So yeah, they would take care of that for you. So Straight 50, have never seen any information about keeping dairy cows in a bioactive terrarium in your vids yet. They make an ideal ISO to keep with tree dart frogs. Love how they look, make a good showpiece. I do love them. Dairy cows are one of my favorite isopods. I'm figuring that with dart frogs like these, some of the dairy cow, the tiny juveniles would be eaten, but maybe many of them. But the dart frogs are very sensitive creatures with very soft skin, and as we talked about, no chemical defenses anymore. They've lost their ability to defend themselves chemically. I do love that shot right there. What do you think? Because of their diet. So I don't think, it's a controversial topic, and I'm not sure I would be confident keeping dart frogs with them. I do have dairy cows in with one crested gecko, have had that for probably a couple of years, no problems whatsoever, but crested geckos are a little tougher than dart frogs. So there's that. Would dairy cows hurt morning geckos, like bite them if they're hungry? Good question. Dart frogs, morning geckos are a little bit probably more able to defend themselves than dart frogs, I guess, and would be more likely to eat the dairy cows up to a larger size, not a full-sized one probably, but larger than a dart frog would. I have kept Porcelia scabra with morning geckos and found that the Porcelia scabra were entirely eaten. All of them were eaten. I'm not sure what would happen with Porcelia laevis. I haven't tried. But I think Porcelia laevis have the potential, if they're hungry enough, to bite almost anything. They're one of those isopods that if they're a little hungry and they haven't eaten enough protein recently or just enough food at all recently, you put your hand in the enclosure, they will nibble on you. So I would be a little bit worried about it. Let's see. And I see Newt's Commander's in the house. Welcome, Newt. Yeah. I need to figure out not to step on Wally's live streams. I have no desire to step on his live streams. I'm going to do them at different times. I'm going to need to figure that out. This is one of the only days I can do it. Okay. So Sandy says, I've never kept frogs. This is from Patreon again. I've never kept frogs. I am curious as to why it's recommended to never touch them. I guess we went over that it's bad for them because any toxins on your skin can cause problems. And we've talked about, she's asking if they have toxins in their skin, and we covered that too. Captive bred ones don't, but it does bother the frog's skin. She was asking about that. And then she says, also, has anyone seen that YouTube video where someone is washing all their frogs in a sink? So weird. And the comments are funny. Search for washing my frogs, start at 1 minute, 30 seconds. I'm not sure if I've seen that one. I might have to check that out. It sounds like probably White's tree frogs, because White's tree frogs are one of the frogs that can be handled very easily. I don't necessarily recommend washing them in the sink with chlorinated water. That sounds like a potential problem. I also would say that a sink might have soap residue in it, which could be harmful for the frogs. But it does sound like a funny video for sure. And there you go, Sandy. Hopefully I've answered all of your questions. I think so. And I'm got to check out that video now. And Roger Logue says, what species would you recommend starting with? Can species be intermixed? Would you recommend starting with tadpoles? So, I would say, for the first question, this species right here, Dendrobates leucomelas, is one of the best species to start with. Not only because it is very hardy in terms of dart frogs. A couple other reasons we'll go through. It's fairly hardy, like we said. It can handle a wider range of temperature, not still a very wide range of temperature, but wider range of temperature than some other species of dart frogs. As far as mixing them, that is a controversial topic. You'll get some people saying yes, some people saying no. Frank's Frogs, who gave these to me, also gave me an auratus, Dendrobates auratus, same genus, different species. It's a kind of a green and black. Particular locality that he gave me was green and black, and there are different color varieties of that species as well. Much shyer, much less bold than these. I wouldn't see it nearly as much. And unfortunately, when I was redoing the plants, that one got out. I didn't see it until it was too late. I found it desiccated later, unfortunately. So that is why I don't have that one anymore. I learned to be more careful about moving things. So, yeah. You can keep them with other species. Some people prefer not to. If you're breeding them, you have to be careful not to keep types that could possibly hybridize. And if you were, that's always an issue. And then there can be aggression between them. But I've seen people do it. I've seen, especially in large enough vivaria, people can do it. I think it was the Oakland Zoo. Saw an absolutely gigantic vivarium where they had the dart frogs. Look at the one up at the top. Which one is that? I just have to check the pattern. That's one of my females up at the top there on the sphagnum moss. Kind of fun. So yeah, it can be done. And then would you recommend starting with tadpoles? Probably not. You could do it, certainly, but tadpoles have a very different husbandry requirements than the adults. And then the tiny little froglets are a little bit tough to deal with. I mean, I've always had success with it. Every time I've tried to raise a tadpole to a froglet, I've succeeded in doing it. Not just with dart frogs, but with other species of frogs, I've also done it. But every specifically dart frog that I've raised from a tadpole has made it to froglethood and beyond. They do require very small food. So for a while, they can't really eat even melanogaster fruit flies. They need to eat mostly springtails for usually a few weeks until they kind of get a little bit bigger and able to handle the smaller melanogaster fruit flies. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting with tadpoles for those reasons. Hopefully that helps. Roger, great questions. Any other good tank mates? Well, some people keep geckos with them, like morning geckos. I have tried keeping morning geckos with them. In fact, originally I had a morning gecko vivarium, and I put my dart frogs in with my morning geckos. And as you can see, I still have morning geckos and I still have dart frogs. So it wasn't a total disaster, but I did lose some morning geckos because I had to change the lid because it was originally ventilated for morning geckos. So then I changed the lid so it was ventilated for dart frogs. And in doing so, the way the lids worked, I had one of the geckos got trapped in between the two lids because I had a screen lid on top of a glass lid. And it got trapped there and died, which was really sad. And so then I decided I needed to separate them, and I did. And now I have them in totally separate vivaria. But it can work depending on the enclosure type. I just wouldn't do it with a particular lid configuration that I once had. Would the dairies work with a red-eyed tree frog? I'm wondering if the red-eyed tree frog is going to eat all of your dairy cows. That's my suspicion, that it will eventually eat them all. They do breed fast, but maybe not that fast. So Sharif has a trio of lukes. This one nickname for this frog, bumblebee dart frogs, is lukes from the scientific name, Dendrobates leucomelas. So that's what these guys are. You can also call them lukes. So Sharif has a trio of lukes that are about a year and a half old. I think I have a 1.2 trio. I don't have any petri dishes under the coconut huts. Is it necessary for breeding? It makes it a lot easier. I think I've actually had some of the dart frogs find little hollows under the leaves and stuff where they actually bred, like little pools. But if you have this coconut hut here and this, where's my other coconut hut? I don't know if you can see it. It's in a little cave over here. So I've got two coconut huts. Each of them has a petri dish under it, and sometimes I put water in them. If I want to try to induce them to breed, I try to keep water in there all the time, distilled water, and then they will tend to breed a lot more readily when you have a situation like that. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but that is generally the way to get them breeding. So Sharif, if you really want to get them breeding, I would suggest doing something like that. And try to do more than one. Like I have the two coconut huts with the petri dish underneath. Try at least two, maybe three if you can make it happen. Okay, so Sharif, you have seen that video, and they're Pac-Man frogs. Okay, cool. Pac-Man frogs are kind of, a resistant sort of frog too, so I guess they could probably handle that better than some others. And Dinan, thank you about the tank. And Waver in Darkness, you should go to the Oakland Zoo. Hopefully it's still there. It's been a few years, but it was cool. And do my frogs have names? Not really. We've thought of names, but I haven't really given them any names. But I have thought about it. But I guess they don't come when they're called. I don't know. So I haven't really done it. Okay, trying to make sure. Any other good tank mates? Well, we talked about morning geckos. There's few other small geckos like Phelsuma clemeri and Lygodactylus williamsi that some people have kept with dart frogs. I haven't kept those with dart frogs at all, so I can't really comment on whether or not that's a good idea. But let's see. Theropod hunter. I've considered getting a siren. That's an aquatic salamander, for those of you who might not know. If you're thinking of the same thing I'm thinking of. Pretty interesting creature. I have never considered getting one, but they're pretty fascinating. We do have an aquatic salamander. We have an axolotl. Axolotls are great. I do like our axolotl a lot. They're and keep them cool enough. Let's see. And since when do you keep isopods? So Tofu Enjoyer, it's a good question because it just depends on how far you want to go back and what you want to count. When I was about 13, I caught some aquatic isopods in an irrigation canal near my house. And I put them in an aquarium and started keeping them, and they produced offspring for me. And I kept them for some time until I put, I think they were Japanese fire-bellied newts in that aquarium, and they ate them. So I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, being a kid, and but those were my first isopods that I kept and bred successfully. Then, fast forward to a few years later, to about 2004, 2005, something like that. Started keeping marine aquaria, and isopods inevitably occur in most marine aquaria, especially when they're stocked with live rock. So I had marine isopods for several years, kept marine aquaria for, I don't know exactly how many years, but a while. Number of years, maybe 6, 7 years, something like that. And so I kept them there. Then, fast forward again to about 2015 or so, I'm thinking. 2015 was somewhere around there. It's been about 9 years since I started keeping terrestrial isopods that I got as a cleanup crew for my morning geckos when I first set up their original bioactive vivarium. So I started with Porcelia scaber orange, some Costa Rican purple micropods, some dwarf whites, and some dwarf striped isopods at that time. So Dinend keeps Phelsuma clemeri, the neon day geckos, beautiful little creatures, with Dendrobates auratus and Phyllobates terribilis orange. Awesome. Oh yes, the theropod hunter. Yeah, some of the neotenic salamanders, kind of like axolotls, that group that remains larval in some respects, even though it's able to reproduce. Some of them have vestigial limbs or just 2 limbs and things like that. So sirens are an example of those. It's pretty cool. So straight 50, a 7-inch by 7-inch by 7-inch, I think, yeah, tank. Work for starting a rubber ducky colony. I would stock it with the 10-12. Certainly, if all the other care requirements are met, I would say yes. You might want a fairly deep substrate, but you could certainly do it in a container that small. I founded a colony, or got a colony breeding in a colony in a container even smaller than that, so it can definitely be done. So, Sean, the insects crawling around under the glass are Drosophila hydei fruit flies that I just added to the dart frog enclosure to feed them. And I've just been kind of powdering it through, dusting's not the right word, I've been adding some to the vivarium as the live stream has been proceeding, a bit at a time, just so that they don't run out of flies during the live stream, hopefully. And that's what you're seeing. You can see one crawling on the leaf. She's about to eat it. Yep. Or is that a he or a she? Let me check. Yeah, that's one of my females. She just ate one of the little Drosophila hydei. And they are not actually wingless, they are flightless. There are a few different types of fruit flies cultured in the hobby, and I have cultured I think 3 different types, the main types, and that is Drosophila hydei flightless, where they have large wings. They can move them to a limited extent, but they cannot fly. They can just move their wings around a little bit. They can, like when you put the supplement, I put vitamin A supplement on these because I do that about once a month. You shouldn't supplement your frogs with vitamin A too often, but about once a month is good. And they will move their wings enough to try to scrape it off, but they can't really fly with their wings. And then there is another type, Drosophila melanogaster is another species. One type is called the Turkish glider, which is a very limited flight ability. It can sort of glide, maybe hop about an inch using its wings. Not very effective, but it moves around, and you can hear them buzzing because they're moving their wings. And I found the buzzing very kind of annoying, to be honest, so I stopped culturing them. And then the Apteris variety, meaning wingless, where they have a very little vestigial knobs in place of wings, which you don't really see with the naked eye. You have to look really close to be able to see them. And those can't fly at all. They can hop a little bit, but they can't fly at all. So those 3 types are cultured in the hobby, and then there are varieties within those. Like there are some that have different colors of bodies, different colors of eyes, and things like that. What is the maximum size tank you would recommend for these? Honestly, you could probably do just fine with depending on the numbers. You could do fine. You could easily double the size of this tank. You could do a 55-gallon tank with a trio like these and be fine. I wouldn't worry about that at all. I think they'd be fine. They'd find the food. They'd be okay. You could probably do more than a trio, in fact, if you did that. You maybe go up to... They usually recommend about 20 gallons per frog for this size of frog. There are other sizes. There are dart frogs that get bigger than these. There are dart frogs that stay much smaller, like the thumbnails. The nickname for them is the thumbnail dart frogs. I don't have any of those. But yeah, you could easily go up to a 55 with a trio like this and you'd be fine. And I currently only keep 1 dart frog species. This is it. This is the only one. I wouldn't mind keeping some others. There's some others I have my eye on, but right now it's just a question of space and time. I don't have enough of either to add any dart frogs. So, temnospondyls ever remain in larval stages? Remind me, temnospondyls, that's not coming to my head what that means. Of all the creatures you keep, isopods, frogs, parakeets, kittens, etc., which do you find the most joy and satisfaction in? So, Dallin, that's a great question. That's a great question. I don't even know, to be honest. I don't. It is really hard to say because it's also different satisfaction. It's also different. I love, right across the room from me, our budgies over there chattering up a storm, and I get a big kick out of dealing with the budgies. They're really fun. I love snakes. I absolutely adore snakes and spend a lot of time with snakes. I feel like snakes really relax me. If I had to pick one reptile to keep, it'd probably be a larger snake. And that might actually be, if I could only pick one animal, that might actually be what it is. But I love isopods. I get endless satisfaction from checking on my isopods and beetles, velvet ants, what have you. I love my colony of multifasciatus cichlids. It's just, whatever I'm looking at, that's the one. I get immense satisfaction from whatever it is. I do find that mammals that roam the house can sometimes be a little bit, they're a mixture of joy and frustration to me. They're both. I find that animals like dart frogs cause very little frustration in most cases. Snakes, very little frustration. Mammals like cats, they do bring me joy and they also frustrate me more because it's just the nature of dealing with the problems they cause. Like right now we have 2 cats. One, a very old cat, well not very old, but he's like 15. 15 is not a young cat anymore anyway. And we also have a very young kitten, and the very young kitten wants to play with the old cat, and the old cat not very excited about it, and that's a source of frustration because they encounter each other in unpleasant ways and things like that. So All right, so straight 50. 2 inches of substrate. You can do 2 inches of substrate. I know that some people are of the school of thought that cubaris isopods, you should have 6 inches and just don't mess with it. Just put in 6 inches of substrate. Other people say, oh, no, a quarter inch is fine. So, and they do fine breeding them too. So it's hard to say. I would say 2 inches is a pretty good middle ground. That's about how much I have in my rubber duck enclosure, and they're doing fine. They're breeding well. So what type of plants are on the wall? To the left we have Ficus pumila quercifolia, or otherwise known as the oak leaf fig. Just to the right of that we have 2 different Neoregelia bromeliad species, and you probably can't see it very well, but there's some Selaginella cuttings down there that are starting to grow right near the coconut hut and right above the coconut hut. And then we've got some more Neoregelias. I think there are 3 different types of Neoregelias in here. The 2 on the right here are the same species. And then there are some ferns which you can barely see up in the top. I have some lemon button fern in the corner there. Maybe you can see it behind the Neoregelia. And then there's a rabbit's foot fern up there too. We do have some live sphagnum moss back behind the Neoregelias and in a couple other spots as well. And I think that's all for live plants in this vivarium. So let's see. Glad everybody's enjoying the frog cam. Me too. Okay, temnospondyls were the giant prehistoric amphibians. Okay, got it. Yeah, that would be interesting to find if any of them were engaged in neoteny or were neotenic, remaining larval stages. But Ike. Okay, so you've got a 20-gallon tank and a conversion kit. So you're going to make it vertical, huh? I think vertical tanks look awesome, and someday I want to do that. I owned a vertically converted kit for a while. I ended up selling it off before I did much with it because it didn't really fit into my projects. But I think that'd be fun to do. I always find when I build a dart frog, when I built this dart frog enclosure, I was like, yay, 9 more gallons than the one I had previously. And then I thought, darn, it's too small. Can't fit everything I want to fit in there. So, waver in darkness, that's an interesting observation about your dairy cows. I wonder what's up with that. So, Ike Forial, do raising fruit flies to feed the dart frogs cause any frustration for you? Well, yes. I think the biggest source of frustration is that sometimes I'll spill some, and those will inevitably get out, and they seem to have this like strange attraction for my wife, and they'll find her, and it annoys her. So there's that. Sometimes I get the mix a little bit wrong, and it gets a little bit soupy, and then I have to be careful not to spill it when I'm feeding the dart frogs. So there's that. I don't have problems with mites or mold really with the fruit flies very often. I don't think I've ever had a problem with mites. I may have had problems with mold a few times, but it's not been a big deal. They are super fun to watch, Sean, I agree. And young lad, yep, we got a new kitten, and the kitten's name is Bug. I didn't name the kitten, but the kitten's name is Bug, appropriately enough. So there you go. And frog cam equals the best cam. No, that's actually a compliment, Newt, because they're my frogs. So I'll take it that way. And yeah, I don't blame you for preferring to look at the frogs and looking at me. I prefer to look at the frogs and look at myself in the mirror too. Oh, so Ike, you're doing a horizontal for dart frogs. I think I see what you're saying. So you do it where you put the glass on the front, but you still keep it sideways. Is that what you're saying? That'd be cool. I've seen that. It's a good way to do it. So Scott's Animal Adventures, hey, I've had compliments on the stream we did together. You posted the link to my Facebook page, and people were watching it and saying they thought it was really cool. So thank you again for interviewing me. It was fun. I enjoyed it, and so did a lot of other people. So just wanted to throw that out there. If none of you have caught that, you can check out the live stream we did on Scott's Animal Adventures. Just there he is right there, Scott. You can check it out. It was fun. We didn't talk all that much about isopods. We talked about some of the other things I keep, and we did talk about isopods some, but we were talking about some other creatures that I keep too, and that was fun, like snakes and velvet ants and whatnot. Blue death feigning beetles. And Herr Wade, hello. How's it going? I'm going to pop in for a second. We've got a little bit of a slowdown in the chat. Just check and see if there are any more comments on. Sometimes we get additional comments on the Patreon, but I'm not seeing any others there. So okay, cool. We'll go. And let's see. So young lad's cat's name is my cat. Yeah, I like it. I like it. It's a very practical name. This is my cat. My cat. Sorry, the getting through the glass with a little bit of water condensation on it, just a touch, makes it a little bit fuzzy. But thank you, Sean. I appreciate all the comments, everyone, on the vivarium with the new setup that I did. I do like the placement better here. One thing I had, you can't really see the cork cave. Well, the dart frog just hopped off of it. But this is a cork cave, and it's not showing up so much. But there's an opening right there, and inside is a cocoa hut like this with a petri dish under it. And I used to have a really huge bromeliad sitting on top of it, but it was like covering everything and shading everything. It looked super cool, but it was gigantic, too big for this vivarium. So I took it out and put it in with a crested gecko, and now it looks cool in there, and there's more space in there. And so I'm hoping that this will work now. And I might actually eventually have to replace these Neoregelias because they get so big, because they're descendants of that one. They're pups from the big one. These seem to stay more manageable. I like how these get really red as they get older, and they get huge, nice thick growth. But yeah, I don't know if they really fit in here. Let's see. So Herr Wade had a chance to get harlequins but passed. The rest of my paludarium is low maintenance. That would have upped it. Well, yeah, it is good to keep that thinking about the maintenance level and what you want to deal with. That's a good idea. So theropod hunter, ideal temperature for dart frogs. Usually in the 70s Fahrenheit, and I know that's not going to be terribly helpful for those of you who don't use Fahrenheit, but generally if it's somewhere between 70 degrees Fahrenheit and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, it's pretty good. Right in the middle of that is really kind of ideal. Some dart frogs can do better a little higher, a little lower. This species can do okay from like 65 Fahrenheit to 85 Fahrenheit, but you don't really want to go higher or lower than that without causing problems. So I try to, keep it closer to 75, 78, somewhere in there, maybe up to 80. But try not to get any higher than that. And most dart frogs do better with a little narrower band. So if you keep them in the 70s, maybe up to 80 or so, they're okay. Let's see. So Ike, the seller 3D printed these conversion kits? Interesting. I'd like to see those. Straight 50. Have you ever purchased isopods from overseas? I have not. Meaning there are isopods I have that were descended from stock that came from overseas, but I've never directly purchased isopods from overseas. I see this group based in Asia on Reddit has some absolutely wild isopods. I really want to get some. Totally understandable. They've got some really cool stuff out there. Some of it is probably not legal. Well, most of it's probably not legal in the US. Some of it is probably not ethically sourced. We don't really know with some of this stuff, just because there are people out there who are collecting isopods from cave systems and stuff like that. That doesn't mean all of them are, but some of them may be. And I do know that there are some isopods that are being sold from overseas that are, not being ethically sourced and so on, which is tricky. And then there are some that are not being legally sold. So there are problems, but hopefully it works out. And it kind of depends on where you are, because if someone in the United States might be dealing with laws that someone in the UK is not dealing with, for example, a different set of laws. So something that might not be legal here might be legal somewhere else with isopods. And yes, I do love bromeliads. And I love all kinds of bromeliads. I love Tillandsia bromeliads. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the air plants, the Tillandsias. You can see the frog tip-tapping the toe. That's one of my females again. You can see her toe wiggling. They tend to do that. Hopefully you can see that. I don't know. Can you see that? She kind of stopped. Nope, she's still doing it. They do this when they're hunting, which is kind of fun. It kind of looks like a nervous tick or something. I don't know exactly why they do it, but it seems to be something they're doing when they're hunting. kind of fun. But tillandsias are the air plants. They have a kind of a silvery look to them. And I've kept those in with the morning geckos and so on. And sometimes for a fairly long time, but they eventually died after 1 or 2 years, you know. Sometimes I'd get them to flower and then have pups, and the pups would grow up and things. But I've never gotten them to last as long as I've gotten the Neoregalias, this genus that I have now. Quite different from the tillandsias. The tillandsias seem to need more air movement, for one. The bromeliads do very well in dart frog, sort of dart froggy situation where there's not that much air movement. Well, young lad, I think it's great that you were able to get that, give that cat a good home where she got what she needed. Yeah, Ike, that's one thing about the bromeliads, they do spread. Ike, you want to post the link of the Facebook. Let me see if I can make you able to do that. I think I can make you do that. Okay, you should be able to post that link now. Try it and see if it works. Tall plant on the left side, also bromeliad. So here there are actually 3 bromeliads. I don't know if you can see all of them, but there's this plant here is a bromeliad that often has polka dots, but it was kind of in a dark spot, so the polka dots aren't in evidence as much. You can see a little bit on the leaves, and that'll grow more. As it grows more in the brighter light, it'll get very strong polka dots. This one here is a different species, and it doesn't really have polka dots. It's flowered for me though, but this is a pup of the original. And then this one here is one of these over here. It's a very young pup right there. So there's 3 different species right there, and 3 different species in the entire vivarium as well. Oh, it looks like Nepenthe species might do well here. That would be cool. So Justin, how often do you water your isopods enclosures? I know the cubaris require more humidity and the imaculatum don't need as much. Lastly, how often do you check on your isopods? Thank you. Well, I've got my kids helping me out with isopod care. 2 of my kids help me with that, and they get pocket money that way. So my youngest son, he gives them like leaf litter every week and things like that. Trying to remember what else. I think that's mostly what he does with isopods, is gives them the leaf litter. And then my daughter, my youngest daughter, she gives them fish food pellets and she waters them. And during the summer, she's been watering twice a week. It depends on the enclosure and stuff like that, but the enclosure is very, that it changes so much depending on your setup. So temperature, air movement, relative humidity, type of substrate, depth of substrate, all that kind of stuff changes how often you water them. So I wouldn't say, well, Russ does it twice a week, so that's what I'm going to do, because it might not suit your situation. But typically, at least during the summer, we've been doing it twice a week. And then in the winter, it's more often once a week. And so the isopods get checked on in some sense several times a week, but usually it's not necessarily me always doing it. So I might not check on an isopod colony for, it might be once a week, it might be once every 2 weeks, depending on the situation. Sometimes it's more often. But a lot of times I like to do kind of a hands-off thing. I'll pop it open, see if it looks okay. If it does, I might not do anything in it. You know what I mean? And if it needs something, then I'll like to, throw it. It needs a handful of leaves, or it needs a little bit more moss, or it needs some water, or I'm going to feed him, whatever. Is it beneficial, your headline here, to put loam, soil, and composted cocoa peat for my cleanup crew, isopods and springtails? Just in their own enclosures, or in a dart frog enclosure? Wondering about that. Oh, so Ike, it's out of stock. Too bad. Okay. That is too bad. Hopefully they'll come into stock at one point and you can post it in a future live stream, something like that. So Theropod Hunter, Devil's Coach Horse beetles. Are those the large rove beetles that are being sold in the UK? Oh yes, the cat wants to be let out, the bigger cat. He was actually a feral cat originally and still goes out in the backyard. He doesn't go very far, but he does go outside sometimes. We tried to have him be an entirely indoor cat, and he tried to kill us. And let's see. Sorry about that. Just took care of that for a moment. Let's see. Going back. Acrocanthus maxima. Always wanted to keep other animals, but I'm afraid my parakeets might freak out because of them. That is a valid concern. We have, our parakeet, you probably just heard him a minute ago. Dealing with him and cats has been really interesting. Our older cat has learned to essentially ignore the parakeet, which is great. Not like we're going to let them take naps together. We're not. But the cat generally ignores the parakeet, which is great. Little kitten is still learning that due to our vigilance and a squirt gun. Or a squirt bottle. So hopefully it works out. So yeah, rove beetles are pretty cool. They're generally a long, thin, flexible beetle with, and they tend to be predatory. They don't have big wing covers that, cover their whole body in the same way you think of most beetles doing. They're a little different that way. I actually have some rove beetles. And Sandy, I wanted to hopefully catch this, but I found a rove beetle the other day, one of our Delosia coriaria. I found it in my super worm beetle enclosure, so they are dispersing. It was from a different part of the room than I originally placed them in, so it seems to be working. They are establishing themselves in the room, apparently. It's the first one I'd seen since I let them go. So Dallin. Okay, so no wonder your name seemed familiar, Dallin. I think that makes sense. You can totally keep isopods without giving them a job. Most of my isopods are not in bioactive cleanup crew situations. Most of my isopods are just in isopod enclosures, so totally, you can do that. I have something like 40 different types of isopods, probably something close to 60 bins of isopods, and that's how I do it. So yeah, totally, you can do that. Did I get a super chat and miss it? It looks like I did, but I'm not sure how to check. Let me see what's going on. So 401 Movies, thank you for the €2 super chat. I appreciate that. I had missed it. I don't know how I missed it, but I did. So thank you so much. So Dallin, we'll keep in touch and we'll figure it out. But yeah, totally. And Hair Wade, red line shrimp and platinum ricefish are breeding in quarantine. No babies in the main tank, must be eating each other there. Oh, that does make sense. Hopefully you'll be able to get them breeding once you separate them out. So Mark 87, how big of a tank? Here, this is a 29 gallon. For a dimension of 35 by 18 by 12 inches, big enough to keep a dart frog? Yeah, you could probably do a couple in there. 35 is not bad. It's long. It'd be long and not very deep, but you could do it. Yep. So straight 5420. I do have an isopod shop. If you go to Aquarimax.com and click on isopod shop, but unfortunately I can't ship outside of the US. And there are some states I can't even ship to. Like I can't ship to Hawaii, I can't currently ship to Florida until everything clears. And then there are restrictions on certain states, and there are definitely restrictions on isopods. So unfortunately can't do Canada at that point. Yep. Oh, I just looked at the clock and realized what time it was. That went faster than I thought. Last time I looked at the clock, we had 10 minutes left, and now I've already gone past. So I'm going to check really quick and see if there are any final questions on Patreon. There are not. Okay. And Mark, as long as you can keep fruit flies alive, dart frogs aren't that hard. Pretty easy. And thank you, everyone. And from JAP, have you ever made videos on Chinese cave geckos? I haven't. I haven't kept those. But they do look really interesting, though. Morning gecko update. I should do a morning gecko update soon. I really should. And thank you, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. And I'll catch you. I have a really fun video coming up because I got to go visit Peter from Bugs in Cyberspace and Jesse from Shapes in Nature down in Arizona. We went out and saw all sorts of fantastic things, so that's coming up really soon. Hopefully I'll be releasing my first video in that series on Friday. I think I'm going to make it a 3-video series. Really excited about that. So there you get a little sneak peek. And Ike, which conversion kit are you interested in? 10-gallon vertical, 20-gallon vertical, or horizontal? I'm just kind of interested in looking at all of them myself. So, all right. So, yep, Arizona video, part 1 of 3 coming up probably Friday if I can manage to finish editing it. But I'm really excited about it. It was so much fun. So, I'm excited to share that with you. And I will see you all soon. Take care.